All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're on a mission to permanently debunk literally the single biggest myth in wine serving. And in the process, I'm going to introduce you to the ultimate temperature guide. Because let's be honest, if you've ever poured a beautiful glass of wine and felt like it was just missing a little something, or maybe it tasted a bit too harsh or overly alcoholic, well, the culprit is almost certainly not the wine itself. It's the temperature. By the end of this, you're going to have the exact sommelier-level knowledge you need to unlock the true flavor profile of every single bottle you open. So let's not waste any time and jump right in.
So, let's start here. When you check out the back of a nice bottle of red or, read a tasting guide, you almost always see the exact same instruction: serve at room temperature. It sounds super straightforward, right? You just leave it on the kitchen counter and pour. But think about it for a second. What exactly is room temperature in your house? If it's the middle of summer, or if you've got the heat cranked up in the dead of winter, your cozy living room is completely different from, say, a drafty dining room in a stone castle 100 years ago. And honestly, this one little phrase, room temperature, is the source of so many ruined bottles of wine.
The difference between these two numbers brilliantly illustrates the core problem. The dictionary conventionally defines modern room temperature as about 20 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit. With our modern central heating and well-insulated homes, that's just what we're used to. But here is the crazy historical truth. The phrase room temperature for wines comes from an era of much cooler, older European homes. The true ideal room temperature for a full-bodied red wine is actually between 15 and 18 degrees Celsius, which is 59 to 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that might leave you reaching for a sweater, but it is exactly what your Cabernet wants to wear. What this really means is that we're likely drinking almost all of our red wines far, far too warm.
Which brings us to the science of service temperature, because hitting that optimal target, it's not just wine snobbery, it's actual chemistry.
You see, wine is this incredibly delicate, complex chemical structure. As the temperature shifts, the way those compounds release aromas into the air and the way they actually interact with the taste receptors on your tongue changes dramatically. Let's look at what happens when we get it completely wrong by contrasting the extremes. If a wine is over-chilled, meaning dropping it below 6 degrees Celsius or 43 Fahrenheit, you're basically putting a gag on the wine. The cold completely masks those delicate flavors in whites, rosés, and sparkling wines. And if you over-chill a red wine, the tannins, the compounds that give red wine its structure, will suddenly taste incredibly thin and harsh in your mouth. On the flip side, serving a wine too warm, exceeding 18 degrees Celsius, is just as bad. The heat literally kills the wine's freshness, that beautiful flavor structure becomes totally muddled, and the wine will often taste overly heavy and totally dominated by the alcohol.
So how on earth do we keep all this straight without, carrying a thermometer around in our pockets? Well, there's this brilliant little concept called the temperature ladder. It's a super memorable mental framework that organizes wine styles logically. It basically solves the serving temperature problem once and for all. You just picture a ladder, starting from the coldest serving temperatures at the very bottom and working your way up to the warmest serving temperatures at the top.
Let's actually walk right up that ladder using a cheat sheet based on official wine education standards. Down at the very bottom step, we have our sparkling wine. This needs to be the coldest, sitting nicely between 6 and 10 degrees Celsius. One step up, we have light whites and rosés. Think of a crisp Pinot Grigio, right around 7 to 10 degrees. Moving up again, full-bodied whites, like a rich oaked Chardonnay, actually need a bit less of a chill. They sit perfectly at 10 to 13 degrees, so you don't freeze out those rich, buttery flavors. Next step up, light reds, like a delicate Pinot Noir. These are fantastic, lightly chilled at 12 to 14 degrees. And finally, the top rung of the ladder, full-bodied reds, like a Cabernet Sauvignon or a Syrah. Notice that even at the very top of the ladder, the absolute maximum is 15 to 18 degrees Celsius. Never, ever hotter.
To really drive this home, check out the official Wine and Spirit Education Trust guidelines. The key takeaway here is how we describe these temperatures. Notice that sweet wines and sparkling wines are termed well-chilled. But look at full-bodied whites and light-bodied reds for a second. They share the exact same description, lightly chilled. Now that is a massive paradigm shift for most people. It literally means your robust whites shouldn't be served ice cold, and your light reds absolutely need a quick stint in the fridge before you pop the cork.
So moving on to practical chilling at home. How do you actually achieve that perfect chill when your guests are arriving in 20 minutes?
Let's talk about the sommelier's ultimate secret weapon, the classic ice bucket. If you want to chill a bottle lightning fast, there are 3 exact sommelier-approved steps you've got to follow. Step 1. Fill your ice bucket 3/4 of the way full.
Step 2, and I promise you, this is the one everyone messes up. You must use equal parts ice and water. And Step 3, plunge the bottle in so it's fully surrounded and submerged by that icy bath.
The crucial thing here is understanding the actual physics of the ice bucket. Why do we need so much water? Well, if you just dump a bag of ice into a bucket and jam a bottle in there, it's going to chill incredibly slowly. Why? Because the air sitting in those little gaps between the ice cubes actually acts as a thermal insulator. It blocks the cold. By adding water, you eliminate those air gaps entirely. The water acts as a rapid conductor, physically transferring the heat out of the glass bottle and melting the ice to cool the wine down fast. It's like magic, but it's just science.
But hey, what about the exact opposite problem? Let's talk about gently warming a too cold red.
Say you just pulled a beautiful, full-bodied red from a freezing winter cellar, or maybe your kitchen fridge sitting at a chilly 5 degrees Celsius. There is a right way and a disastrously wrong way to fix this. The wrong way, which unfortunately is super common, is to place the bottle near a radiator or roaring fireplace or any direct heat source to warm it up quickly. Please don't do this. Sudden exposure to extreme heat will physically cook the wine and cause permanent damage to its flavor profile. The right way, the safe way, is to simply pour the wine and cup the bowl of the glass with your hands. Your gentle body heat will naturally and safely transfer to the wine, bringing it up to temperature perfectly in just a few minutes.
Finally, let's talk about protecting the wine before it's even poured. Because honestly, all this temperature control means absolutely nothing if the bottle's environment is ruining it in advance.
If you want a wine to really age, develop, and hit its peak over time, you've got to respect its environment. Whether you're setting up a massive cellar or just a little storage rack in the corner, here are the absolute non-negotiables. First, you need a cool, constant temperature, ideally right between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. Fluctuations are the enemy here. Second, let it rest in the dark. UV sunlight and even fluorescent LED lighting can heat up the wine and seriously degrade it. Third, for bottles with natural corks, they must be stored horizontally. This keeps the liquid in contact with the cork, keeping it nice and moist so it doesn't dry out and let oxygen in. Although, quick caveat, if your wine uses a screw cap, often called a Stelvin enclosure, it is perfectly safe to store that one standing vertically.
Which brings us to the ultimate question for you. How are you going to serve your very next bottle? Are you going to let your expensive red sit out on a sweltering kitchen counter, or are you going to use the temperature ladder? Will you give your light reds that much-needed quick chill, and will you finally stop freezing the life out of your premium whites? Now that you are officially armed with this sommelier-level knowledge, I challenge you to apply it to the very next glass you pour. I guarantee you, once you taste a wine at its true intended temperature, you'll never look at room temperature the same way again. And honestly, it kind of makes you wonder, what other everyday foods and drinks are we serving completely wrong just because of some outdated historical habit? Thanks so much for exploring this with me.